So it is true that if you want to get a point across in today's world, you must weave it and tell it like a story. Much like how we remember fairy tales because of the storytelling, it is important to every auditor that we learn this art and get the point across in a manner that makes the other party remember the whole issue rather than just bits of it. Our next panel discussion is on the art of storytelling from the listener's perspective. I'd like to invite the moderator, Mr. Rajiv Gupta. Mr. Rajiv is an author, speaker, and a leader in governance and risk management. He's currently working as the Vice President and Group Head of Internal Audits at Flipkart. Prior to this, he has worked as the Senior Vice President of Global Audits at Diageo, Head of Internal Audits for India and Southwest Asia at Coca-Cola, and the Assurance Manager with PwC in India and London. He is the author of Technical Guide on Internal Audit of Beverage Industry, published by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in December 2013. Over to you, Mr. Rajiv, to introduce the panelists.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this afternoon. And I have Preet and Krishnan with me joining for this panel discussion. Quick round of introduction. So Preet is a CFO and board member at IKEA Group India. She has been with the company for more than 7 years now. Preet has played a key role in the entry of IKEA in India, with its first store opening in Hyderabad in 2018. She also leads the sustainability agenda for the company, and also plays an active role in dialogues and conversation with government on policy matters that impacts retail business and investments in India. Prior to this, Preet has worked with BBC Global News, Tata Donnelly, and KPMG. So welcome, Preet. Welcome to this panel discussion. With that, I will move to Krishnan. So Krishnan is the Chief Digital and Information Officer with Titan Company Limited. And as we all know, Titan is reinventing itself as what we call a phygital organization, one that seamlessly combines the best of the physical and the digital products and services to deliver truly new age experiences. So welcome, Krishnan, to this panel.
Thank you.
So with that, and having both of you on for this conversation from the stakeholders' perspective, the topic which we have today is not a technical topic, not on maybe the accounting standards or on the detailed aspects of the technology risk, but it is more about the storytelling part. Yeah, it is about conveying the message to the stakeholders. So with that perspective in mind, the first question, maybe Preet, we can start with you. First question coming is, why auditors need to even think about storytelling? See the audit reports, those findings, they have all the required details. So what else a stakeholder is actually looking from the auditors?
Sure. Thank you very much. Rajiv, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah, Preet, I can hear you now.
So I think you started the question almost like a puzzle where the answer to the question lies in the question itself. And you said storytelling, and then you said convey the message. And I think that is the answer. I mean, why do we communicate with each other? That's kind of very fundamental, right? You want to get your message across. There is an objective, whatever task you're doing, and in the case of an internal audit or an audit, there is an objective that you're resolving. An internal audit, I see more closely linked to the business, to be honest, than a statutory audit, right? And eventually your attempt is to make the business better. At least that's the way I view internal audit. And how are you going to make the business better? If you're able to actually pick up the threads of all the data, weave them together into saying, what does this mean for the listener to whom I am actually addressing, my audit report? What does it mean for the business? What is the impact that, my analysis or my audit or my fact finding has? and to be able to convey that message, now whether you call it storytelling, whether you call it, relaying the business impact, relaying the areas for improvement, you need to be able to put it in the context of the business, and you need to be able to put it in the language which, your receiver and your stakeholder is used to understanding, to be able to do something with it. Yeah, because a task is never done just for the sake of completing a task. So go back to the objective, and how do you achieve that objective is by getting your message across. That's a short answer to your question.
Very clear, Preet. So Krishna, from your lens, from your experience, would you like to add anything to this?
Well, perhaps only offer one perspective additional to what Preet has already summarized totally. It is to be able to distinguish when a story is required and when it may not be. So, if you look at the digital side of things, for example, a discovery of a weak password policy, you don't need to tell a story there. Password is weak, please strengthen the rules, that's it.
Yeah.
To me, where the story is probably relevant and probably even required would be where the business, the process, and the technology all kind of come into confluence. And so, therefore, is the essence of the issue. Therefore, what might be the remedial action or actions needs to come out through a narrative and not just a plain statement of fact. Because the directions of remediation themselves have to be articulated, even if not explicitly stated, so that people can quickly zero in on what is required to be done. So maybe there are contexts in which the story needs to be told, and in some areas it is so obvious. Don't waste time.
Very true. Yeah, please,
I
carry on.
can just come in here. Totally agree, Krishnan. I think, yes, some areas are so stark, it's like black or white or right or wrong, and totally agree that you don't need to kind of, tell the story. But I find the true purpose, if you really, I mean, not kind of a one-time audit, but the true purpose of actually doing, particularly from an internal audit angle, is to continuously find improvements in the business. And that's where the context becomes more important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even from the audit head perspective, what I have seen, that many times we get too much. Many times the audit finding becomes the baby of that auditor. Yeah, and hence any additional perspective coming from the stakeholder is sometimes taken as a challenge to that baby itself. Yeah, and that is where the listening skill becomes very important, even from for the auditor's perspective as well, so that when we are coming up with a complete context, then that context covers both the compliance as well as the real world scenario as well. So that is something which I have seen working really well when we understand the business perspective as well, obviously without compromising the independence and the independent view of the auditors. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Now, when I talk about storytelling or messaging, then sometimes especially the young auditors, they have this question that, okay, if it is all about putting this thing in the right perspective, speaking the language of the business, and what it means to the business, but I don't have all this liberty to incorporate into my audit report, because my audit report format, my template, my reporting mechanism, it is always fixed. It is something which is not flexible. So how I can then take care of the of this context setting or about giving the right messaging? So what would you suggest, Preet, on that part?
I think in general there is almost like a need to reevaluate audit formats, from that perspective. And yes, there is a certain set format. Processes have to be done. As a CFO, I totally get that, right? But how do you then wrap it up, right? So you do your report, you do your detailed analysis, you share everything in exactly the format that is to be shared. But how do you then wrap it up and highlight, give your summary, give your highlight, I give the story, give the, what is it that I am trying to say, along with whatever is the technical requirement with the exact format of the report. So the two need to come together, right? Each on its own does not make sense. So even storytelling without facts and figures will not make sense. Some, if you come and tell me, that this is where, you're going wrong, in a particular area, you need to back it up with facts and figures. And any business head or any CFO will go back and they look at your summary, but they will also go back and look at how are you backing it up with data, right? So your data, and therefore that is also very important. So all your data, all your formats, all your reports are very, very important. But how do you then wrap it up to be able to convey the message? So the two need to come together.
Yeah, and Krishnan, from your perspective, when you see this type of, when reports coming to you or the audit discussions coming to you with very standard, very set format, very much set format, and without having those flexibility. So what is your take in that case? What would be your view?
Well, again, depends on context, like I just said, right? Some items do not deserve more than that. And frankly, trying to write more in these domains would be a waste of everybody's time, right? And in some other areas, obviously the background is required, right? If you take Titan, for example, right? We are going to be 20 million customers in our loyalty database, hopefully by the end of this financial year. Many transactions across thousands of stores, gift cards, different payment, including you can exchange your existing gold for a new ornament. I mean, there are so many transactional combinations that we provide, right? Like many other companies do. And so therefore, the story of a particular transaction has to be told well to say that here is where we have detected something that's out of pattern. And if this pattern is repeating possibly across other stores, then we need to examine. So that's where a story is required so that folks can understand what exactly happened. So to me, again, it's subject matter. And when to tell the story and when to move on quickly with a bullet point is really the skill that the presentation team needs to have. And I guess it's the learned skill. So, and there are seniors to advise always.
Now, fully agreed. And from my angle, I'll just add a couple of perspective. What I see as the audit head is, see, all the leaders, all the professionals, whom we are serving, everybody, is looking for maximum value of that, whatever, half an hour, 1 hour, or maybe 5 minutes they are investing for any conversation, for any discussion. Now, within that time, how quickly we can pass on the message to them. So, for example, if say the audit team has tested, say, 100 odd controls, maybe comprising of some of the infosec controls and some of the business finance controls, and they found some significant risk areas in 5 of those controls, mixture of both these areas. The objective is how quickly we pass on that message, obviously in the descending order of the importance to the leader, so that in case, instead of say half an hour original scheduled time, if they are only left with say 10 minutes, then how we can make maximum use of those 10 minutes instead of starting with a lot of statistics. We tested so many controls, we got cooperation from so many teams, we spent so many hours. So we can kill all that fact, and we can start with the key message, which is super important, whether it is CFO or the CIO. And depending upon their area of interest, we can go deeper into where they want to have more maybe more detailed discussion. It varies from many times leader to leader, and what is closer, what they consider as a bigger pain point. Yeah. So I have seen that if we, as auditors, if we focus our discussions that way, then many times it helps make optimum use of the stakeholders' time, whether it's a finance leader or the technology leader, and and other functional leaders as well. So with that, I will move to the next one, and which is on. Let's take a scenario where, suppose me and my team, they have done amazing data analysis, and as you both know, data analysis is something which is in thing now. A lot of auditors, they are now going big way into data analysis. So here's a situation where, for example, there is a young auditor who has done some really fantastic analysis visualizations using some really fancy tools, and whatever he has found, he has put it into a tabular format for both of you, clearly identifying what all great effort he has put in, and what all he found as part of the analysis. But many times when I join those meetings, Preet, I see leaders really feel that too much has been shared, and they complain ki, I am getting lost in the data. So what do you think, Preet, where we should be drawing the line based on your experience? The team has actually done huge amount of data analysis. They have put in a lot of effort. But many times leaders get confused. So what do you think where that line should be drawn?
So let me maybe give you an example, where, and this is actually a live one, from the work that we've been doing. And sometimes I feel people just get caught up in the analysis itself, because it is interesting. I mean, we're all, we are chartered accountants or MBA finance, and we are in the profession because we love numbers, right? So, so it is very interesting. You start to dig deeper into things, and you keep analyzing, and you can come up with like a lot of data. And of course, it is good work, and it is all very interesting. And we've, I've on a recent such cases sort of actually said to people, saying, stop and go back to what is your objective. What were you trying to do in the first place? Yeah, I get all of whatever, but now put it in the context of what you were trying to do in the first place. So if you come to me, for example, even as an auditor, and sort of say that here's an opportunity for you to actually improve your margin by 5%. Okay. Or here's how you can actually stop your cash losses by X amount or whatever. And then support it with data. And then tell me, you've kind of got the attention. Okay. Got the attention at the first instance. I think it's also about catching the value of what you're bringing to the table. Yeah. And to ensure what do you gather out of the data. Data for the sake of data will mean nothing to, to the person sitting outside the analysis. And you can actually very easily either confuse people or, even to the extent of people get bored just looking at figures, unless there's a pattern emerging out of them. So you need to be able to identify the pattern and convey that up front, grab the attention, and then go deep.
Very true, Preet. Point noted. And Krishna, would you like to add anything based on your experience, maybe with auditors and maybe with other functions as well?
Well, both IKEA and Titan are design companies, so applying design thinking here is the simplest first thing to do. So you ask the question why probably 3 times to say, why should this finding be of interest to anybody? Right? And if you ask the question often enough, you will come with the headline which, like Preet said, gains attention. And hopefully just simply moves into the storytelling itself. Right? But just go backward as much as required to understand why all this effort that you have put is of use to anyone. I mean, you take my area of responsibility. It is possible to create systems that nobody uses, but which have actually involved some very intelligent thinking and some serious sums of money. But somewhere you just missed out the fact of why you're doing it in the first place. And then unfortunately the project has to be shelved. So I think that's really the audit team head's function more than anyone else's to ensure that his team asks a question why, and she or he leads by example in probably actually dropping items irrespective of effort. So both काम किया लेकिन कुछ काम का नहीं है. Don't talk about it.
Absolutely.
So editing is required.
Not
Very
totally agree. Sometimes totally agree. Sometimes you can spend, and I've done my share of being the auditor as well. You can spend a lot of time, and you've really not found anything which is of value, which is fine. I mean, then it's your job to kind of carry on the great organization. You can't kind of
Yeah.
find anything, but yeah, you don't have to. Also, sometimes I feel, or sometimes I think the aspect of we have to find something and our job is to find mistakes, maybe that's kind of the wrong attitude, as well. Say it's a bit the same thing in any communication, right? Say something if you have something meaningful to say, otherwise don't. You don't have to stand up and say something just for the sake of saying it. And that's again fundamentals of communication.
See, audit KPI design is a tricky one.
Sorry?
I said audit team KPI design is a tricky one.
That is true.
And I fully agree, Krishnan, to that point, because sometimes I get really surprised when I hear in some of the audit functions, some of the auditors, they get evaluated based on number of significant risks they have reported. So now this is something which is very, very judgmental and which is very, very controversial as well. There are both pros and cons to this, and maybe we'll park this particular point for a later conversation, maybe a face-to-face one, because I have my views, and I'm sure a lot of audit leaders in this webinar may have slightly different views. So with that, I will share my perspective as well on this particular question, which is what I have seen that as you when you speak with the leader and as they keep moving higher up in the hierarchy, the amount of time and the attention they can give to a single topic, because as they keep growing, the amount of things which are on their plate plus the amount of decisions they have to make, probably every day, that increases multifold, and hence whatever needs to be conveyed to them, it has to be very quick. I recently learned about this 5-second rule, where it says, if by looking at your slide, if the message is somewhat clear to the leader in 5 seconds, you are a success for that slide.
Actually, what? Sorry to interrupt you, Rajiv, but actually I have a difference of opinion there. If the audit team is convinced that it has things of value to say, then simply ask for more time. Why cut everything else to fit in the time allotted? Say that we need more time this time because we have more to say.
Absolutely. Correct. So, see, given the fact, so Krishna, I am fully with you. And given the fact that the original meeting, for example, is scheduled, say, for 30 minutes or for 1 hour, and the auditors have a lot to discuss. So what needs to be discussed or prioritized in that original scheduled 30 minutes or 1 hour? I think that's something which they need to prioritize. And then based on what is left, a follow-up call, I fully agree with you, needs to be set up. But efforts needs to be made to make more optimum use of that original allotted time, to get the maximum value out of it. So fully with you on that. And as far as the messaging is concerned, let's come to the point quickly, and then in whichever area more details are required, so that can be the follow-up conversation as well. So that's what I have seen as well, Krishnan working pretty well with the leaders.
Well, actually, I'm not very sure about whether it should be follow-up or maybe even prior to the meeting, right? Because audit findings usually follow a certain process. Right? The findings, for example, the findings in my area of responsibility don't come to me first. They obviously come to my senior colleagues first, right? And so therefore the storytelling and the listening, even before the storytelling, the listening to the story itself needs to happen in other meetings, so that there is collegial agreement that yes, this issue is of value and we are aligned on the fact that it needs to be presented. Or the auditor, from your own view, would put foot down and say, no, you guys may say it is not that important, but I believe it is. And so I'm going to present it anyway, right? But either which way, either agree or agree to disagree should have happened even prior, so that when you have the meetings that we are talking about, everyone in the company knows that a very quality discussion with responsible folks has already happened. And if that is a good starting point, then my trust in the relevance of that meeting is already established because my colleagues have seen it. So then things should ideally be easier from there on. Not that they are always, but most of the time.
Yeah. And
very true.
Maybe
I wanted to add something.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I think first of all, to with all respect, of course, if the findings are such that the matters are such that there is more time needed, there is detail needed. Of course, that must be done. And of course, the independence of the auditors and their opinions. If the auditor saying something is important has to be shared, of course, must be shared because that's who you are then, and that's your integrity as an auditor, right? And that's your professional integrity as an auditor. And that, of course, as a as a CFO or as an organization, we must respect, as well. But I think this is more also towards people who join the profession, at the start and all. Is one request is cut out jargon, please. Use simple English. I say that even internally to my own teams. There are times when I have banned use of saying these, if it's a technical discussion, I tell them, okay, these 4 words can't use. Now explain the matter to me. Okay, now tell me what is the issue. Okay, and because you just get so caught up in technicals, right? And if you really want to explain what is the problem, what is the underlying problem, like tell me in plain, simple English. Okay, and I think that is also very, very, important. And I'm kind of talking about it because this is a session on, how to communicate the message. I'm not at all meaning to take away the relevance of any, audit findings.
Very true. And, dealing with jargons is something, again, I struggle many times, especially when you are new in an organization. So now you are in IKEA for 7 years. But in my first year in every organization I worked for, I struggled a lot. And I said, let's consider that whosoever is the reader of your report, presume that some of the readers will be new. Yeah. So don't make their life difficult by using a lot of jargons. Presume that they don't know any of your jargons. So whether include in the finding or include in the footnote with italics, small font, whatever you want to do. So I could very easily connect with that suggestion as well. You want to add something, Preet?
No.
Okay. So point well noted.
The jargon trap is a universal one. I mean, I'm right in the middle of one of the most jargon-ridden professions, right? And so it's certainly a continual effort on my part also personally to try and ensure that I don't use it, and my colleagues also when speaking. And we do give a lot of opportunity to our colleagues to present to senior management and leadership as well, is to try and tell the story from the stakeholders' perspective and use business language as much as possible, and certainly avoid version numbers of software for sure. Right? They are meaningless even to me, very frankly. Right? But and then so be very careful with what you're putting on the chart and why. Simple.
True. And I fully agree, especially in the InfoSec domain, it becomes all the more challenging many times to decode the audit report. So I have survived many of those audit reports. So fully with you, Krishnan, on that. So if those 4 or 5 discussion points which we had so far, if I have to summarize, and then maybe I will open up for Q&A for the questions coming from the the participants as well. So if I summarize what I heard, the key messages from both of you, Preet and Krishnan. One is try to be as much closer to the business and have the conversations, have the messaging conveyed in such a manner that it helps make business better and see what is more meaningful to the business and try to speak their language. So that is one message I heard from coming from you. Second is Krishnan, on very you very beautifully articulated that if there's something as simple as the password security or things like that, you don't need to really have a big story around it. It's so simple, straightforward, tell it and move on. But those aspects which may be newer or maybe more complex for the listener to understand, we may have to have the story or messaging around it. So that I heard from you. On the report format perspective, some of the inputs you have shared is try to give as much highlights and summarize the findings as well, along with going into details, and see if there's a need to reevaluate the audit formats or to customize that to serve both the purpose audit as well as for the business. I also heard suggestions of the messaging on the last question, which was on the value what we are bringing through data analysis. So Preet, you shared about start with the value you are bringing onto the table and cut out all the jargons from the report, from the discussions and so on. And very good suggestion, Krishnan, coming from your side on whether you are an auditor or any other professional, apply design thinking in anything and everything you do. Ask 5 why, and if you do that, you will come to a headline or the key message, which everybody will be able to connect well. So these are some of the messages which me as one of the auditor I will be taking home. And with that, I will open up for the questions which we may have from the audience as well. So do we have any questions from the audience? Otherwise, in the meantime, I will ask okay. So there is one coming up. So I'll read out for both of you. All 3 of you come from companies which sell stories, product to customer. Is there some training that a person can go through to hone the skill? Basically, the storytelling skill. So that question is from Aarti Krishnan. No, sorry, not Aarti Krishnan. So that's a question from audience shared by Aarti.
Maybe I'll just take a go at this one, right?
Yeah, please, Krishnan.
The storytelling domain is very different, right? Storytelling for, let's say, Titan brand would be very different than the storytelling an auditor needs to do. So that's one of the traps of the English language, right? We use the same word for things that are truly different, right? Now here the storytelling skill is really that of trying to become a veteran of the business in a very short time. It's not easy. Let's acknowledge that upfront. To understand how the business operates and why customers come, what are the processes created, and what's the technology serving them all, how do these come together? And so where the domain of audit is a confluence of all 3, you need serious understanding of all 3, so that you can actually tell the story in a way that convinces people, A, that the finding is valid, and B, that there is a plan of action evident in the description of the issue itself. Not easy, and I don't want to venture an answer here. I'll probably defer to Preet that one.
Yeah, I would say, what you call storytelling for me, it's basic communication skills. So if someone's kind of looking for enhancement, I would, say there are enough courses available on, on communication skills, and a lot of what we spoke about, in fact, today is, basic communication skill. Presentation, at the art of making presentations, maybe, that could help. And Krishnan, to your point, I totally get to have this expectation that, an auditor will come in a very short of time, understand the business. That's also a humongous expectation. So I also then, I always say, when you point fingers at others, there are four fingers pointing back or 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. And it is also then therefore the client's responsibility to ensure that you bring the auditor in. You know, if you're really asking for value, then it's also my responsibility that I explain
Absolutely.
and I bring you into into my organization, my process, or and then it's a two-way partnership. Otherwise, it can't work.
Yes.
Very true. And I will just add, to what both Preet, you and Krishnan have shared. So yes, foundationally, it is all about communication skills. Yeah. And there are many, best-selling books which are available, soft copies or Kindle versions and hard copies which are available. And there are some, these digital programs also on the storytelling, not only for auditors. I mean, storytelling in general. For example, what Apple does, what the other Google and other companies do. So there are some programs. Maybe if you can do just search on LinkedIn, you will find some good programs on that. I had recently, got one program organized for my team here at Flipkart. We liked it, but I will not take the name of that, service providers, because there is no sponsorship, or there is no connection which we have with them. So maybe if anyone interested, I can offline share, with whom we, whose services we used, and if you can independently evaluate and then take the call. But yes, fully agreed. It is all about working on the foundations of the communication skills, and then, as Krishna also said, it comes with the time. It comes with with practice and more exposure presentations. Yeah.
Yeah.
So next question. I will move to the next one. It is for me actually. That there must be so much of data analytics at the companies I have worked. How have you used the results in your storytelling? Again, it is not about sharing all that data with the stakeholders and making them overwhelmed with the with the amount of data me and my team has analyzed. It is all about looking at what is really valuable to the listener. Now, that listener, for example, if he or she is a CFO, then what type of risk the CFO would be interested in. So out of different analytics which the team has performed, I will focus for that particular conversation. I will focus on the ones which are more finance related. Now, if I'm say meeting ethics and compliance leader, he may not be that much interested in the analytics relating to financial numbers, but he may be interested in those analytics which are about potential override of controls, which may be intentional or unintentional, we don't know. So he may be interested in override of controls. Finance leader may be interested in the ones where we may be losing something. The infosec head may be interested in those analytics which relates to access rights, segregation of duties, transactions entered by those people who have already left the organization, right? So it varies from the audience whom we are meeting, who is the recipient of that data analytics. So that would be that's how I use. Next question, Krishnan, is for you. Am I audible, guys? I see that
Yes.
the network
Yes,
is a bit slow right now.
We can hear you.
Preet and Krishnan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So would the storytelling be different for
so I'm
service
audible.
company?
Very good. So Krishnan, next
As compared
question
to
is for
product
you.
company.
Would the storytelling with respect to audit be different for a service company as compared to a product company?
To the extent that domains could be different. Right now, if you take a service company like let's say
Krishnan, can you
TCS,
hear
for
me?
example. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Right. So let's take a services company like TCS. Giant number of contracts.
So in the meantime, I will move to the next question, which
We
is,
can hear Krishnan.
can you share some examples of well-told stories from your experience? Sorry, Krishnan is answering somehow. Sorry,
Rajiv,
I can't hear him right now.
Okay, so let me just. I hope you have enough time. So let's take a B2B services company like TCS delivering to giant corporates, right? And you have project definitions, the tender process, revenue recognition itself based on stage-wise completion of a project, and so on and so forth. So the domain itself is different, and so therefore the audit approach in terms of what to look for and which areas to look into would be different. And so therefore the actual communication of the story is naturally different than, let's say, in Titan, where you're talking of many units of precious merchandise being created all over the country, sold all over the world, and obviously sourcing also happening. And we obviously have a great accent on responsible sourcing, especially of precious stones and so on and so forth, right? So the audit here would be different. But like we mentioned before, and Preet also said, the storytelling skill is possibly a generic one. It fundamentally keeps the listener in the center, the person who is supposed to listen to you, and tells the story from her point of view as much as possible, right? And once that general skill is mastered, or at least understood and learned well, it's possible to apply it to different situations. But the domain of audit for Flipkart would be very different than that of Titan, I'm sure. I mean, Flipkart, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't manufacture. We design, manufacture, we have raw material lying all over the place, stores of it. So naturally, very different topics of audit in both companies.
Yeah, thanks, Krishnan. The next question is on can we share some examples of well-told stories? So Preet, would you like to pick one from maybe from one of the recent past?
So in fact, interesting. When I was actually, I looked at the question and I was kind of wondering, but I'm sorry, but I don't have an example of a well-told audit story. Okay, yeah, but I think
that's
there are.
fine.
But I think, but that is also I think what is interesting, and that is interesting even from a CFO function perspective, right? Because most of the times we are dealing with very hard topics, and so are the auditors, right? And how do you put a hard topic in the context of the business? And I think therefore a well-told story from my side probably is maybe the way we introduce our organization or people who come into our organization or our stakeholders into risk management, right? And unfortunately, risk management can also start with what can go wrong. So if you actually start with examples of real life examples of what has gone wrong and what is the impact that has had, you do then grab people's attentions to, okay, now I need to listen, and how can I not end in a situation like that. I'm sorry, that's kind of a negative start, but it is what it is, because what you're really trying to do is prevent people from making the same mistakes, okay, or introducing them to the topic of why do you need risk-based processes, right? So I mean that's probably a good example that I can share in terms of when we start with, instead of showing, we actually start with showing what has gone wrong in real life situations, and from our business, and how do you prevent, and how do you then change, and how do you ensure that that doesn't happen for the future.
True, Preet. And maybe I can add a quick perspective. What I have seen.
If
Yeah,
you have
please.
time, I'd like to just add one quick perspective to what we mentioned. I do have an interesting experience in my past. I was responsible for a global project in one of the large financial services companies, and I requested the regional head of audit to participate in a concurrent audit. We go live. And his first reaction was, "We don't do this. We usually come after everything is done and then audit." But then he didn't forget it. He actually came back a week or two later and said, "We can run this program for you." And it was, I think, the first time it was done in that organization. And it was very effective. The colleague did the right orientation along with us. And that is when the implementation of what we went live with was stronger for his participation. So that to me was a very refreshing contrast to all my previous experiences with auditors. I can tell you that very frankly. Since we are at the end, maybe I'll take it a little lightly, not too seriously. But probably the first experience in my life when we were actually on the same side of the table.
That's a very relevant example, Krishnan, and you will see slowly many audit functions. Many auditors now they have started spending quality time, investing quality time on advisory and business partnership as well. Years ago, as you rightly said, more than 95% of the efforts were on post-mortem only. You do mistake and then we will come. Yeah. So now that that proposition is changing, and a lot of those business partnering, a lot of those advisory time is now being invested by the audit function. So you will see and hear more and more audit functions doing that now in the recent times. So one last point from my side, which I have seen works really well in storytelling, is what I call 2x2. Historically, I have been very notorious in just focusing on what has gone wrong, maybe because the reporting format was like that. So, one of the senior leader I was working for, he said, Rajiv, we have done 99 things right. One thing we made blunder, we agree. But your report is showing as if our job was only doing this one thing, and that also is blunder. So, while we used to prepare audit opinion, this and that, but somehow considering the overall glamorization of that one finding which we had, that is when I thought of bringing 2x2 into picture, which means now for last many years, whichever company I have been part of, we start our audit report with two things which have gone really well, which summarizes the great things which that function is doing. A great means, see, every function is doing something well. Yeah. So that audit report then starts with telling a brief story about what is going well in that function, in that process which we have audited, and then two themes which is basically which is culminating from the audit report which we have released. That these are the two key themes of developmental areas where this process needs to focus on. So what we have seen, that when any leader reads that report, which starts with the positive and also shares at the same time what are the key themes coming from the detailed report, maybe 10-20 pager report later on, it sends a very balanced message. And then obviously, depending upon how much time that leader wants to invest, he can keep digging to the executive summary and then to the detailed report. But from storytelling perspective, this aspect of what is working well also helps. So that's something which I would encourage those functions which have not tried it, try it once, and based on your opinion, your experience, you can decide whether to continue with that or not. So with that, yeah.
You soften them up for the kill.
No, so it purely depends upon the experience, but it really helps, Preet. That's my experience again. Yeah. So with that, I know we are very well on time. And once again, thank you so much, Preet, and thank you, Krishnan, for this great discussion on slightly different topic than what we normally discuss in our audit conferences and webinars. And I'm very happy that we had leaders like you both to share the non-audit, the receiving side of the experience, what you are expecting, what you are looking from your colleagues in the audit side, to have a balanced view and to get the points sold and to get the things moving faster. Yeah. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Preet. And thank you, Krishnan. It was a truly engaging conversation. And I really, like Krishnan from our end also mentioned, it was truly nice that you summarized the whole thing, preparing for the kill. Rajiv started off with, you should have spoken about all the positives and then, prepare for the kill. That was really a nice take on it. But we truly agree that, you place your value proposition first. You first tell them things that will catch their attention and then probably go into the story itself. Thank you so much once again for taking out time and making it to our event today.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for inviting.